Hello and welcome to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you every single Wednesday here in the Standard Class Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM. This show is live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter streaming. Love for you to jump on. Let us know where you're listening from. Show is rebroadcast every Sunday on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM from 12 until 2. My brother Kevin. Good day, sir.
Good morrow.
Morrow, sir.
I think I heard that in a British movie. I don't know. I guess it's sort of the same thing.
I will tell you this. We visited a church last weekend, and they had a guy who was British, and he gave the eulogy in British. It just sounded cooler. I was like, that just took it to a whole nother level. Maybe every pastor should just do their best British accent to bring this thing home.
Funny. Wait, that's a great environment for it. Well, listen, you got sort of modern where they use the F for TH. Like thing is thing.
Thing.
I don't know what, maybe that's lower London or
right.
something. And then you got old, Shakespearean stuff like betwixt, thrice.
Thou'lt.
And so it's all super duper
Twixt.
Cooler than, Yankee / Southern
How y'all
hillbilly.
doing?
But,
oh, man.
But anyway, happy today.
Happy today. Thank you guys for joining us. Kevin and I are always honored to be on the air with you. And the hope is to have a conversation about topics and things that matter specifically in regards to our faith life. The show's called Wake Up Our Faith because, we believe that without faith, you cannot please God. So everything that does not result from faith is not pleasing to Him. And so we want to challenge and encourage people to walk that out, live that out, and be the good news in the lives of others. That's what this is about. So appreciate you jumping on. The show is made possible by our corporate partners, one of those being Physical Therapy Services of Wilmington. Catch them on the web at ptservicesofwilmington.com. Serving southeastern North Carolina since 1983, family owned and operated with more than 100 years experience in the office there. Do give them a call, 910-763-8286. So Kev, today, we kind of dive in just before we go on air about, what we're going to talk about today or what God's put on our hearts. And I'm jazzed because this topic of leadership is what we're going to really press into today. Mm-hmm. And this is it's just sorely lacking in our culture. What is leadership and how do we look for it? What's the definition of true leadership? What things, to be aware of or cautious of? So big, giant topic today that I'm pumped about.
Well, I think leadership is wearing your Patagonia hat and having a tall microphone and just being mad. That's it, bro.
Just be me. It's funny. My wife was like, Liz was like, you need a haircut, And I was like,
oh, is that what's going on?
Yeah. She was like, you need a haircut. I was like, it's getting moppy up there. I was like, well, listen, I'll just rock a hat. You know what I mean? I ain't got no shame in this thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Just rock a hat,
That's one of that is 50% of the great use of a hat. Just pop it on. Very cool. So, leadership. Well, it's a terminology or a term that I wish we could toss out and use something different. For instance, things grow old in time. The word purpose has been, probably since the early 90s, has been just thrown around so much that it almost has no meaning anymore. So what we use is heavenly value on earth. And we just use we talk about the same things, but we use different terminology and just kind of hit refresh. So leadership, unfortunately, we haven't come up with a new term, so we'll stick with it for now. But anyway, there's a lot more underneath that than, we're not against these guys out there who are sort of in the faith camp or in the businessy camp, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, there's a blend right there. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars, their time, energy on this stuff. And I'm not going to say it doesn't help, but it's just like marriage books and all that stuff you buy on the shelf. Is it really changing things? Does it really truly transform everything? So we're coming at it from a completely different approach. We're not joining that camp. We're not against it, but we're saying this is completely different. It's built exclusively off Scripture, but applied and lived out and experienced. So there's proof of concept.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a big thing.
Well, but it's so necessary.
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's so necessary. I had this thought the other day, and we've talked about it before too. It is that Christianity, the move of Jesus, right? Just look at it that way.
Yeah. The
movement of Jesus Christ is the most transformative movement in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
Right.
And so when you look at the kingdom of God, the principles and the details underneath that are dynamically valuable in our lives. Because it's not just a declaration about what to believe or what religion to be a part of. It's a declaration of how we were created and how we are to navigate this thing called life. And so when you take that and start to look underneath, get the religiosity out, look at the truth of it, that's what we're tapping into. That this is the greatest example of leadership in the history of the world.
Yeah.
So let's unpack it and how we begin to navigate it. A second thought that I think is challenging how we define leadership in culture today. If someone's a manager or they've been there for 22 years or they're a boss, they automatically are looked to in this position of leadership, which may not be the case at all because they might not be leading in a healthy way at all. So to distinguish the differentiation between just someone like a pastor who's on stage, you know what I mean, is not any greater than someone in the audience or a manager to his, employees.
Right. Well, just because someone has some power doesn't mean they have authority. For instance, Hitler had lots of power, and I'm going wild with this, but he didn't truly have any heavenly authority on earth, and God snapped it out. But you take a police officer, for example, they don't even have to have any armament. They can just stand in front of your car in the street and hold up a hand. And of course, your car could easily just run right over the guy or gal, but that hand that has authority backing it up, not just power, but authority of the government, etc. So there's a big difference there, and I think leadership starts with authority, and God gives power to that authority to carry it out. So that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
You may be a manager somewhere, a rock star on stage with 10,000 members, and we see those around the country. That doesn't make you a leader. So what makes you a leader is who you are and what you've experienced, and allowing God's authority to work through you. And then he gives you that territory, which is the power, et cetera.
And I think another danger that we have in our Americanized culture today is how we measure who has authority. We confuse the two. So if someone has a bigger house, if they have a recreational vehicle, if they own 4 businesses, we automatically think they have authority, when in reality they might have power. And that's that facade. There are business people today that are completely illegitimate in their practices. We talked about the drug dealer out of Colombia.
Oh yeah, Pablo Escobar.
My man had everything, but there was nothing legitimate about it. And so there was no heavenly authority, like you said, but there was an incredible amount of power.
Right.
And for us in our lives, as we're looking to follow people, because we're always following somebody, learn to follow heavenly authority instead of just someone quote unquote in power. That's a strong thought.
Yeah, and I like the word follow is good. We are called to follow. Jesus said, "Go and make disciples of all men." So that's huge. So it's a big part of what's missing in the Sunday model. Discipleship is almost non-existent because of logistics or whatever. But following is a call. We have to follow Jesus. Well, Jesus gives us wisdom and disciplers and teachers along the way to help us. But I like the terminology, hey, we're standing on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And that's it's the same idea between, people don't like to be taught, but they love to learn. So nobody wants to be micromanaged or spoon-fed. And so what we're doing is flipping it all over and saying, look, when you follow, all you're doing is standing on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So we can stand on Billy Graham's shoulders or Martin Luther or whoever, and it's a place of honor. But authority, one big difference is authority has eternity in mind, and power has just the immediate
temporal.
So
earthly.
So authority is it's like the heart moves the hands. It doesn't work the other way around. So we want to lead first by understanding who we are, because it's already got authority in it. And it's excuse me, I'm a little congested, but it's like the kid, and I got a young man I'm working with right now. We doing okay?
We got 30 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. We'll come back to this, but there's a huge difference here, just versus these two things. So I'll wait and we'll come back in a minute.
And this is awesome. There's a ton of huge thoughts here, powerful things. I want to go into the break reminding you guys, Kevin, of what you just said. Authority has eternity in mind, whereas power is temporary and is of earthly things. So we're going to dive into this further here on Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, back right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you every single Wednesday. Appreciate you guys jumping in, tuning in here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. If you're listening live on the Big Talker, we appreciate you as well. Want to thank our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Fountain Financial Services and Chris Riley. They have been giving clients and their associates a better life for more than 20 years, and they're in the business of keeping promises. Thankful for Chris Riley and the team at Fountain Financial. Feel free to give them a call if you have any needs in that capacity, 910-256-8882. Today, Kev, we are talking about leadership And before we went into the break, you said you had a thought about someone that you're walking with right now, someone that you're mentoring, as it relates to this conversation about the difference between power and authority in leadership.
Well, I forgot, but that's what happens. You get a little older and still works great, but it doesn't last as long. But I will touch on this a little bit. Who you are is where your authority comes from. I mean, ultimately, it comes from the Lord. He created you, so it's really important. So one way to look at this, and I was talking to this young man yesterday. He's a great, I call him a great kid. He's like 27, 28 years old. Just really got a good start in life and has a bright future. But still learning and ready to jump in. So a lot of this stuff's real sensitive, and while there's hunger, there's also sort of that resistance. Wow, that it kind of like you were a little bit in the very beginning, and this is several years back, about well, why do I have to live in a van, and do I have to let go of everything?
Polarizing it all, right?
Yeah, it's like God just wants you to be some hippie in a tunic and. Or Bob Marley or something. And it's not about that. It's about being honest and clear with who you are. And that's a difficult place to get to when you've always, especially the younger you are, the more you are cultured, ingrained, taught things that aren't bad, but they're not necessarily the main thing.
Yeah. So
you have to get through all of that without upsetting the apple cart gently, and then get back. So one way to look at it is, and I've mentioned this before, is if you want to know who you are, you have to stop thinking of what you're going to say in an elevator. You have to start thinking about, who you were in the womb. And now you weren't probably cognizant of it then, but you can look back, and so it's a great picture, because when you're 6, if I say, "Who are you?" you're going to say, "I'm Matt," or, Matthew, whatever you guys called you back then. But that's what a kid thinks, right?
Yeah.
All your kids are going to say their name, and that's important, but that's not really who they are. So when you get to college, you may say, "I'm an athlete," or "I'm a baseball player," or "I'm a student," or whatever. And you get a little older, and you talk about your career. Over here, well, I'm an insurance agent, or I'm a wife and a mother. So put your family together. But really, who you are, those are all things that are a part of the power God's given you. But your authority comes from a deeper place. Who you are is who God wired, created with time, intention, geography, variable circumstance, and put you here now. That has authority on it. So you have to go back to that place to really, really be an eternal leader, and then all those other things begin to work together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, complete. Would that be something, Kevin, that you would call calling? Your calling? Do you would define that as like how?
My calling. I've been called. High glory.
I just
bringing in the sheaves
to say I love you. Sorry, my calling. What? How would we refer to this? Right? Like, I mean, in cultural language. Is it equated to a calling? Is it a purpose? Is it a character, identity? I mean, there's so many differentiators, but just as a nugget there.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords, and they change every so often, and they should change because people get sick of them.
Right.
I think the idea of calling comes from, I heard God's voice, and I must follow, and that used to be related more to the pulpit, and I've got to go preach and be poor and itinerant. And, so that's the old movies and things. Really, it's not a call. It's there from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's there now for those who are yet to come. God's done this already. Yeah. He spoke it all into existence. He knew us well before. So I wouldn't really call it a calling, even though I use that terminology sometimes, try to stay away from it. It's more of a heavenly value on earth in a period of time.
Okay.
But it's kingdom now, But it's also paradoxical because it's kingdom coming. So we have the future, but we're not focused on that exclusively. Like, whoa, in the great beyond, and I can't wait until it's all, and we're there, and let's go hunker down. So now what we're saying is, let's do it. Let's get to work now on earth as it is in heaven, which is what Jesus' prayer was.
So when you look at somebody like Bono or Oprah or Tony Robbins or these folks, I mean, you know, we're not talking about their faith beliefs, but they are people who are living this thing out, that
Absolutely.
thing that's in them.
Yeah,
and so just to be clear is that, you know, Bono from that early age, like this heavenly value was placed in him. So whether or not you honor God with it, we recognize it in people. You know, we see a great athlete or a musician or an artist and go, wow, they're talented.
Right.
What we're really saying is that they are living their U-print. They're living their heavenly value out on earth.
Yeah, you can live that out because God's put it all in place and not believe.
Yeah.
Now, we don't recommend that because that's short term. It's great. Long term, which is, you know, a lot longer. It's not very good. But prevenient grace covers all that, not saving grace. A different topic. But yeah, that's the point, is to get to that thing in you that is really who you are. And there's so many different ways for the enemy to thwart that. The enemy can't unring a bell. He can't uncreate you. You're a new creation according to the Lord. So all he can do is derail you. And influence you away from that. That's why that's so important. And what greater form of obedience is there than to be the pot that the potter created in great detail, down to the fine painting on it. You know, that's how much care he gave to this. So we got to honor that and then let him be above all and him be our great influence, rather than even good people like parents and friends and all that stuff.
One of the things that I feel right now is we are, as a culture, enamored with these rags to riches stories. You know, people who, hey, I was inspiring. I was a chef, and you know, but I always had this desire to be a singer or whatever. You know, I was working as an insurance agent, and I had this desire to be, you know, X. And so we're inspired by these things because they speak to this thing that's planted inside of us.
I want to be a candlestick maker.
You would
or a baker.
You would be a candlestick maker.
I'd like to do
these
that.
Intricate candlesticks, man. I promise you that. They would be detailed, my friend, and beautiful. Pure gold.
I'd make it like a fake nose out of it. Just put a sorry.
Oh man, I think the point I wanted to make with that was that we recognize this in culture, because it speaks to our heart.
It does.
It speaks to what God's placed inside of us, which is why it's so inspiring when someone does it. But I think the time is now for us to step into that, which is what we do, and I think tying that back into authority is given by God in that thing.
Yes.
And you might be trying to manufacture power, success, whatever, by doing something else. But when in reality, your greatest authority is by doing what God placed you here to do and becoming that person.
Right. Well, a good example of power would be having a really significant income. And you let me know about time.
You got about a minute.
Our clock is it's behind me now, so I've got to. We'll adjust it later. But you know, if you have let's say you're making a really good high 6-figure income, and that's you know, a few great accounts in your business, and you know, that's power, because you can go and do a lot with that income. You can generate more with it, et cetera, invest. But three phone calls and you're out. You know, the CFOs jump in and why are we doing this? And, you know, it's no longer about whatever you're doing. So that is, power is easily overcome, but authority isn't.
Yes.
And that's where God is behind you. And for instance, let's go to a wide other angle, the family. We see marriages broken up and all this stuff. Well, guess what? When you stand on that, God is for the family. So there's authority in that. When someone wants out, there's no authority in that. You see, that's just another example.
Yeah, this is a great idea.
Area.
Power can be taken and lost. Authority cannot. This is a cool conversation, guys. We're taking a short break. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams on Wake Up Our Faith. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you in the Standard Glass studio here at Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM, halfway through the first hour here and having a fantastic conversation. Thank you guys for those who are jumping on live. If you are listening on our podcast, make sure you give us a rating and review there. Let us know what you think about it on iTunes. Can be found at Wake Up Our Faith. I want to thank our corporate partners for making this show possible, one of those being the Honeycutt Group. This is a family-owned insurance brokerage. Been in business more than 10 years. Whether you're looking for home, auto, life insurance, any insurance needs, feel free to give Chad Honeycutt and his team a call, the Honeycutt Group, 910-338-1773. Today, folks, we're having a really cool conversation about leadership, and it started out with the difference between power and authority. And the nuggets that I have taken from this already, I want to encourage you to kind of recap on this, is number one, authority is what God places in you when he creates you, and it has eternity in mind, whereas power is something that's temporary and it's worldly. By that same token, that's why power can be taken or lost, but authority cannot be. That's right. And so the challenge and charge here is for you, for me, for us to begin living in our heavenly value, our heavenly identity. Therefore, we carry the authority of heaven in what we do, and it cannot be taken from us. That's right. And this is profound and powerful to understand and dive into.
Yeah. Well, we used some examples a little bit ago, and I left off with this applies to all of life, but I use the family for example. If you've got someone who wants out of a marriage, and one spouse says, this is what God wants. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? There's different things. So let's just set all that aside and look at the fundamental idea that God is for marriage, not against it. So right in that statement, there's authority that you can stand on confidently and place a demand on God because he wants it that way. So if you start right there, you can already have confidence in authority, in the authority you've been given to hold that together. You may have to wait and watch him work and all that, but the person that goes against that may have rights and all these other things in the laws, which would be power, necessarily not heavenly authority, because anything that goes against God does not have that authority. All right, so that's a very practical day-to-day examples. And what's the divorce rate, like 66% or something? So we have to be leaders in that, and not just in the on stage or in business, et cetera. So anyway, leadership is understanding who you are and following that. So there's some traits to look for, traits to overlook, or not overlook, but identify what to kind of walk away from.
Yeah, what to avoid.
What to avoid, traits or the lack thereof to avoid. When you're looking for leadership, not looking necessarily to follow, but when you're trying to identify it, to encourage it or be a part of it.
Yeah. So this is just as a recap here for those. What we're trying to do now, what we're going to do now, is set up how to begin looking for heavenly leadership, how to begin looking for authority.
What's it look like?
Traits and characteristics that heavenly authority will have with it, and traits and characteristics that it won't, so we can be on guard, if you will.
Right. And just real quick before we do that, another example, just another one from the Bible, is Moses. Moses could have taken the logical route and become, whatever authority in that realm, the prince, or whatever level he could have reached
when he was in Egypt.
When he was an Egyptian,
right?
By legal means, and he could have freed those people. But see, that didn't have God's authority on it, and so he had to do it God's way. Well, that included a refinement process. Moses had to be prepared. So in that authority, there are things that look difficult, but they are preparatory So anyway, I just wanted to draw that as another example. So we've got 3 different examples.
Well, and a key on that whole Moses story there is Moses could have gone into Pharaoh's house and been in the power position and delivered the people, but then Moses would have been able to take credit for it because that's, I advanced myself and I worked hard and all that kind of stuff. Whereas with God, he wants to get the credit. And so that's one of the things.
It's all he wants.
Yeah. That's one of the things I know we'll dive into in a little bit, but that just triggered in my brain because that's super cool. We can always know we're going for power if we're looking to take credit for something. And if we're following authority, we're simply wanting to give God credit for it.
That's right.
That's a good heart check.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, as we look outward and navigate life, not only do we want to understand where God's authority is through leadership, because there are people that are meant to come into our lives and be a part of what we're doing, people that we need to help and mentor. And there are other people that, are meant to be leaders to us. And that's what the family of God is all about. So that said, we need to be able to identify these things and really check, what does this look like? Where is it coming from? So what that looks like, there's some obvious things. Leadership has some obvious things and then some less obvious things. And so we'll talk about both of those. But how does leadership display itself? And so I've got written down, in marriage, spouse, in business, in parenting, in innovation, just simply brainstorming and creating new ideas that help people. It could be a song or an invention that doesn't require business. It's just innovation, right? In relationships, friendships, and in service and giving and helps. All of this requires or is a way for leadership to be displayed.
Yeah. And
there's a lot more, but these are some big ones.
Yeah, I think the differentiator here is it's not just saying this is in your business. It's in every facet of your life.
Right. And we'll get into business in the next hour as a stream or a vertical for this, but leadership is from God. God wants us to lead. That's what kingdom-mindedness is all about. And, either we take over or evil takes over. So we have to learn how to lead. So these are some really key areas, that they're obvious to people. Oh, yeah, that, and that. We all kind of have this in our life in one way or another. So anyway, just making that. But the obvious things that we notice immediately about people when we say, oh, they're a leader, one of them is courage. We see courage. And we go, ooh. And that does something to us to make us want to follow that. We don't always feel comfortable with it, but there's something that we can't let go of. So courage is an obvious one. You can call it whatever you want, but courage is the word that's obvious to me. And the other one is integrity. And I want to define those two.
I'm writing all this down. I don't want to side rail you on
this. No, but these are the obvious things. Mm-hmm. So these are things we just know. You see it, you go, ooh, I know it. The older you get, the more life you live, it's so obvious. But these things are not enough.
That's not the full expression.
These things can go south quick if that's all there is. So, but just because, you see a Ferrari, it may have a Volkswagen, a little Beetle engine in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can't just, the old sayings, don't judge a book by its cover. Either direction, don't credit a book by its cover either. So, the obvious things may be included in this, but we got to get below the surface and start looking at the less obvious things. But anyway, before we do that, and you keep me going on time here, I don't want to lose sight of it.
Yeah, we got about a minute for the break. Let's define these obvious things before we mention the less obvious things.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So these two things are really important, but I don't think everybody really always knows what they mean. We have an idea of it. But in this context, courage is doing what you believe in. Courage is doing what you believe. All right? Integrity is doing what you say. So doing what you believe and doing what you say, that's the facade of leadership. It's the body. It's great. We need that. But those aren't enough. They are important, but they can go either direction if we don't get below the surface when we're trying to identify who leaders are.
Absolutely. Well, that's key because, again, it creates an environment for us that we can automatically have a foundation, but then let's press deeper. We're going to go deeper after the break. You're listening to Matt Ham, Kevin Adams on Wake Up Our Faith. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you, live in the Standard Glass Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM. Many thanks to Nick Craig in studio today producing the show as part of the team here at the Big Talker. They've got a fantastic daytime lineup. The Joe Catanacci Show, Chad Adams Show, rounding out the morning. In the afternoon, Dave Ramsey. And then I'm drawn to Hannity. There you go. I was drawing a blank. I want to say Glenn Beck, but it's not Glenn Beck. It's Sean Hannity. Nick's giving me the eyes. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. We are thankful for our corporate partners making this show possible. One of those being Century 21 Swire and Associates. This is our exclusive real estate partner. They have more than 30 years experience in the real estate market here in southeastern North Carolina, one of the Carolina's most successful real estate organizations. Feel free to give Jeff and his team a call, 910-256-0021. Today's conversation is just, man, I'm flowing, Kev. You have to slow me down, man. You know me, I get excited and fast talking and all that and run off down rabbit trails. But this is so necessary because leadership is sorely lacking in our culture today, period, end of story.
Right.
So defining how it is played out, what it is not, is so important.
Right.
That's what we've been doing today. And before the break, we talked about two obvious characteristics of leadership. One being courage, which you defined as doing what you believe.
Yes.
One being integrity, which is doing what you say.
Yep.
So if you call someone a leader and they're not doing what they believe and they're not doing what they say, beware.
Yeah, they're off track, but those are the obvious areas. It's kind of like the whole idea of your flesh, your soul, and your spirit. There's three things going on there, three relational things that God created. We have to be led by the spirit, the soul in submission. Soul is a mind, will, and emotions, and then our flesh. But the fleshly things are so obvious to us as Christians. Don't rob banks, look at pornography, that kind of thing. We may still do it. I hope not, but it's obvious.
Yeah.
The things that are not obvious are the things where we've actually put our spouse above God, or our children, we kind of worship them by accident, by giving them something they don't need or whatever. So this is just a correlative type example to help show this. So courage, and integrity both are really important, but they're also very obvious. You can detect them pretty quick, because if somebody doesn't do what they believe, they struggle. They have an internal battle, and it comes out in stress. And if somebody doesn't do what they say, well, we see that, right? We've seen that a lot in people. I'm sure Jesus saw it a lot. So that's a big one. But those two things are pretty easy to spot. The areas that are not so easy to spot, and this is why discipleship is so important, because you have to walk with people and help them not only learn these things, but overcome or jump into them and grow into them from all different perspectives. But those things are the less obvious things that take a little bit more time. This goes in with counting the cost before you build the tower. It's not fear-based, it's good stewardship, it's based in wisdom. But those things are empathy, and we've talked about them before, but they're empathy, vulnerability, and humility. Empathy, vulnerability, and humility.
Yeah.
Now, those things are not typically associated with leadership,
right?
But leadership requires it, especially God's leadership. And Jesus had all three of those.
Yeah.
So, he had all five of these totally, but and more. But these are the ones where we can really miss the boat. So we can define them if you want to, or talk through them.
Let me throw a thought in there on this, Kev. There's this five-legged stool that I see, that's this cornerstone pillar of just true faith-centered leadership, Christ-likeness.
Yes.
And gosh, man, one of the things that you and I have talked about at length is we kind of navigate, bringing YouPrint to life and developing the Life Center idea.
Yeah.
And when you navigate with people, you have conversations, relationships with people,
right.
It's almost an immediate thing that you begin to recognize when there's a lack of empathy, when there's a lack of humility, or when there's a lack of vulnerability.
Right.
And if people go, those are weak, or I don't need those. But Jesus is the model in this world that we cannot just toss into the river.
Right.
And so we have to have an assessment of our heart to ask ourselves honestly, am I empathetic?
Yeah.
Am I being vulnerable? And am I being humble? Every leader should have the courage, right, to really do that, and they don't.
Well, and so the point is there are people with courage and integrity, but they have not empathy, vulnerability, and humility. And I think we've seen that in some examples recently in some relationships we've gone through and struggled with. So on the surface, it looks like a Ferrari, but there's a sewing machine engine in there, and at some point you want to pile in and go on and do this magnificent thing, but you find out the car only goes 3 miles an hour, and it's going tick 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 tick, and it has no torque, no pull. You can't go uphill with it, etc. So this empathy, vulnerability, and humility are the engine, because they allow us to yield. They are yielded, wonderful qualities that are taking on God's character, whereas courage, these things are in the heart. Integrity, these are not mindsets. They're not rules. They are, the wonderful place of your heart. But your heart is incomplete and askew if you do not have empathy, vulnerability, and humility. So we can walk through what each of those mean specifically. I talk all day about this stuff.
Yeah, let's define those three characteristics. And again, my challenge to our listeners today is to pause for a second and list these things out. Are you doing what you believe? Do you have courage?
Yeah, this is a free education.
Yeah, I mean, this is
through some hard blood and gut knocks. So.
This is seriously transform your next day for certain, and the rest of your life if you'll let it.
Yes.
Are you willing to assess yourself in these 5 areas?
Yes.
And are you doing what you believe? One of the things that I did not do for the longest time is I lived from a place of obligation. I did what I thought I had to do instead of what I truly believed in. Yeah. And it's a lack of courage that you're just not willing to be honest about, because you cover it up with, oh, well, you got to do this, or you got to do that, or but no, it's not authentic. It doesn't have authority.
Right.
Therefore, it's not courageous.
That's right.
And that's just one example. So let's define these other 3 here, because this is fantastic.
Well, and the world throws rocks. People call me arrogant, that kind of stuff. And I just want to go, wait a second, I'm just stepping into what I truly believe, and I'm not going to back off of it for the good of you, me, anybody. But that's not arrogance, So people the enemy tries to twist things that have the dark underbelly of courage would be arrogance, and it's just not that. So that's an example of how people try to pull you away from those things that you're just talking about, and you learned that, and you stepped into it, and you have courage. But anyway, these empathy, vulnerability, and humility. So empathy is sharing in others' pain, and we share in God's pain by learning to share in the pain of others.
Yeah,
and that's empathy. That's really, really walking in it. It could look like a lot of different things, and we don't have time to get into it too deeply, but the point is it's very specific. If you're in pain, I need to share that pain in whatever way I can. It doesn't mean sending a loaf of bread over there necessarily. It means, hey, talk to me.
Yeah.
What can I do to help you? But I'm here to actually help you, not just say it.
Not just, man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Can I whatever? But I also want to feel it with you, and help you let it out. So it's sharing in others' pain, empathy. Vulnerability, transparency. It dethrones strongholds. So it's like shooting into the sky. When you're transparent, nothing can get its hook in you. So vulnerability looks like weakness, but it's actually clarity, see-through, transparency. People can identify with. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Jesus had that. So it dethrones strongholds. And humility, really the best way, and I love some good definitions of it out there, but to me it's just complete focus on others. So you can do that, and it's not woe is me and beating yourself up or thinking you don't have a calling, but it's focusing on others utterly with all your heart. to love on them.
Yeah. Guys, this is incredibly powerful stuff. I truly hope that you will take some time to dive into it. Of course, we're here for that. Connect with us, info@uprint.life, or join the Portable Faith community at wakeupmyfaith.com to get started. We appreciate you kicking off this first hour of Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We'll be back for hour 2 right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is Matt Hammond, Kevin Adams, kicking off a second hour here on this wonderful Wednesday, live from the Standard Glass Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker. And today, Kev, we are jumping into kind of a new segment, new format, if you will, for the show in the second hour. And it's really pressing into this conversation as it relates to business. And it's so important because our heart as an organization, both in our nonprofit endeavors with the Life Center, but also within our business, which is UPrint, is to break down the walls that have inadvertently been built between all that is faith and all that is business. And there's this invisible wall, sometimes it's actually visible, between churches and businesses that neither entity is willing to cross, and therefore they've separated something that God intended to be together. Yeah. And I think I'm excited about it. I know you are. And so as we dive into this, why do you feel like it's important to take a step in this direction with business as it relates to our faith?
Did you say the second hour?
Hour.
Do you say herbs or herbs? I put a little British spin.
Herbs. Herbs.
So if a guy named Herb eats some herbs.
Herb ate some herbs.
In the second hour. Sorry. I need a little humor. I'm out of coffee. I need a little humor infusion. But why is it important? Well, here's the thing, right? It is impossible to please God without faith. That is Scripture. So either you believe it or you don't. If you do, you have to stand on that. So true or false? Well, put business on the end of that. It is impossible to please God without faith, brackets, in business. Still true? Still true? How do you argue with that? It's true or it's not. It's just all true or none of it's true. You throw Scripture out or you completely stand on it. You can't fence sit with God. So business, one of the reasons it's so important, and business, it doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur necessarily, what it means is there's transactions going on and you're a part of contributing to that so that you have income. So it can be your job, it can be contract labor, it can be anything, a typical corporation that it can be working, being a clockmaker in your bedroom and whatever. It's business, it's commerce. It's trading services and resources, et cetera. So where do we spend most of our time during the week? A lot of it's sleeping, hopefully. That's important. And a little bit of it's with our friends and family, which is also important. And a tiny, tiny sliver of it is spent with God, which is kind of ridiculous. That doesn't mean church attendance. I'm talking about your quiet time. You might spend a couple hours at church or listening to something. It's all sort of the same thing anymore, right? Technology's blown the walls off of it. So all that said, coming down to this point, around the mountain, where do you spend the majority of your time? And I do it every week, and you do it every week. It's in business, right? That's huge. That is your biggest life investment, aside from the blessings in parenting and being a good spouse and friendships and all that. As far as just your time investment, the majority of it's going into your business.
Yeah. The challenge question for me is are you inviting God into that time with you? And for so many people, there is a dividing line that when they set foot in their business, they cannot bring their faith with them.
Right.
Or it's this hard and fast thing where I'm going to stand up and I'm going to preach to you and that kind of thing, which is not it either.
Right.
And so for me, as we talk about this, in the previous hour today, we talked about some leadership characteristics, 3 of those being unseen characteristics we listed as empathy, vulnerability, and humility. The others being courage and integrity. I feel like for the heart of this for me, Kev, is really helping people bring, honor and integrity and excellence and vulnerability and humility into their place of business. One of the passages in Scripture that God is used, actually 2, in Luke 5, when Jesus is calling his first disciples, he actually goes to where they do their work. They're fishermen.
Sure.
He went into their business arena and he taught them. And then he blessed them with this catch, and then he invited them. And so, our heart is that mirrored heart. Same thing with Levi, the tax collector. Jesus went into his home and had a meal with them, and then he invited them. Much to the scrutiny of all the brass who said, why are you doing this?
Right.
So our heart is the same, is to go into the lives of people where they're spending the majority of their time and helping them bring faith into that.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the obstacles. The immediate obstacle is what I'm called to do is preach at the office, and I can't do that. Pontificate, evangelize, whatever. And it's because you got overlapping worlds. Way back when people were agriculturalists and growing farms, and they sat down for a meal and talked about the Lord and blessings, it works better. It does not work in the technology soundbite world where people at every stoplight are staring at their phone. They don't care about what you have to say, your opinions, and preaching, especially because that feels oppressive. So, and there's good in that actually, because there's a lot of crap out there that you don't need to adhere to. So what do we do with that? We step into that world and we say, wait a second, this is not about doing what you needed to do 100 years ago. The best way to share the good news is to be that. So how do we be that? We step into Jesus's shoes. In other words, he's our model. We're not saving people, right? He does that. Yeah. But he's our model of sonship. So when we act like him, God's purpose fills us and it works. So when we become who we're supposed to be, this is rule number one, and we do it incredibly well in that environment, unless we're in the wrong business, we need to get out of it. When we do that, it works, and people see excellence, and that builds relationships because people follow that, and when they do, God gives you the right way to love on them and speak to them and teach them that it's freedom, it's not oppression, it's not religion. The Bible defines religion as helping widows and orphans. So, I mean, that terminology is just divisive, right? So anyway, that is the best definition of this and why it's important.
Yeah.
But you got to have more than an elevator talk to get through that. So it's a baby steps, little steps, but it's more about you being who you're supposed to be. And you got two hands, right? One points at your own struggles and one points at your Redeemer. You're not there to oppress. You're there to set free. Best way to do that is to be excellent in who you are.
Yes.
Translated out through people love success.
Sure.
So that's not backing away from the narrative out of fear, which is what a lot of people do. I can't alienate my clients. How many times have we heard that?
Yes.
And that's a load of crap.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A does not alienate clients.
They sell lots of chicken sandwiches, friends.
There's a lot. It's all every one you ever go to at 12 o'clock. There's a line around the building.
Yeah.
That's God's blessing because they're fearless and bold, but they're not preaching from the counter. They're just being excellent and pointing to God. See, it's so powerful and it's so ridiculously simple.
Yeah.
That people got to get out of all this lack of just crazy mentality and jump in. It's a great adventure. But business is the best environment because we're spending so much time there.
Right.
We can accomplish a lot.
Well, and the marketplace is so powerful because of the resources that it generates to be used for the kingdom. I always think about I always think about the parable of the talents. When the man gave the talents, he said, "Go and engage in business." Yeah. That was his command to them. Yeah. Go engage in business. And he didn't say, that's exactly what he said. Yeah. And it's what the Father says to us. Mm-hmm. It's like, man, I've placed this in your heart.
That's right.
These desires, these gifts, this thing, this U-print as we call it.
Yeah.
Go engage in business. Mm-hmm. Add value to people. Be excellent in what you do. And it will be magnetic for me.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, so funding the kingdom requires innovation and entrepreneurship. It requires people who lead and come up with great ideas, and then people to carry out those ideas. And it's one body, many parts. It's exactly the same thing. And we see it in the world, but as long as you don't talk about God, it's fine.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because God created commerce and business and freedom, and all of this is from Him.
His idea.
Yeah. So, just because Jesus said, "Follow me" to the fishermen, he wasn't saying fishing's bad. I mean, they kept doing it. Right. Well, let's not mix, business and faith. And it is utterly immature and simplistic. And, I'm saying it. But yeah. So we've got to get past all that, recognize who we are, step into business.
Yeah.
As a ministry.
Yeah, and that's why we're here, guys. We're going to take a short break. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, back right after this. Hello, and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams here in the second hour today. This is our Faith in Business segment of Wake Up Our Faith, helping people live out their faith where they spend the majority of their time. It's inviting excellence and integrity into your work week. We want to empower you and help you to do that. And part of the way, Kev, that we will do that is by having business owners and business people as guests to come into the show here, share their stories, their testimonies, how God is blessing their business, how they're leveraging their resources for the kingdom. Super excited about that. If our listeners have anyone that they would like to nominate for us to connect with and possibly have on the show, make sure you connect with us by emailing us info@uprint.life. In addition, we're going to take this live and begin going into the community with a regular Faith in Business leadership series where we'll be going into places of business, gathering business leaders as part of our role in the community to bolster and foster kind of the kingdom work in business. So it's real exciting. We're honored to be a part of it. Appreciate you guys jumping in. Part of the way that businesses get involved with what we do is they become partners on the show. These are partners of ours. Many of these are personal friends. We are all about who they are. They're living out God's expression for their life. And so we want to encourage you guys to go check them out. One of those being Greg Veman, Dr. Greg Veman at Seacoast Skin Surgery and his ministry, Everlasting Strength. Dr. Veman embodies this in a great way.
Right.
It's a very cool story. He's been on the show before. But if you have any interest in what Greg does, you can give him a call at 910-256-2100. So, Kev, one of the things that really sparked this in our conversations is we've navigated this thing for 2.5 years now, 3 years now, is business people began coming to us and saying, I hear that you guys are into kind of business leadership, of faith-based leadership, executive coaching, and we see a desperate need for this in our culture today.
Yeah.
And as we meet with these business people, they bring in questions, challenges, and ideas, and we'll get to some of those in a minute. But I want to ask you, as a man who was in business for 25, 30 years.
Who was in business. Yeah, man, for a while, way back and such and whatnot.
But still in business.
I'm 52. I've been in some form of business since I was probably 16, always doing little things, selling sandwiches or whatever. So,
what stands out to you as the most impactful moment in your life, of business life, to kind of narrow it down into that, as an opportunity to truly express your faith in your business? Can you think of maybe an example of what that looked like for you?
Well, I think the environment, and you've got seasonal, generational stuff involved. I mean, things have changed a lot. I've had lots and lots of opportunities, including technological advances, and we come up with some really cool stuff. And we're on the edge a few times of really, really blowing the doors off and being, multi-millionaires. But God had a better plan for me, and so I guess just collectively I look at it as a journey where I got to understand the business environment from an inside and an outsider's perspective. So I think it's more of a collective than a moment. There are certainly great milestones, getting a huge check and, make $100,000 in an hour, that kind of thing. Those are all really neat things to see happen. But really, what I learned is people mostly are sincere. We've had, all kind of embezzlement. We've had all kind of people come and go and steal and take and a lot of bad things. And I always had a desire to just to tie it back into faith in business. That desire was there. I didn't know how to do it. So the environment's changed in a good way, but I tried to force it. And one of those ways is I even gave my employees, I had a pretty good sized payroll at one point, and I gave them all 10% raises if they would just tithe from that. And nobody did. You're talking 12 people or so. It was like, so I tried to make that happen, but it was more from a much more immature place.
Sure.
But now what we're seeing is we've got to start from the ground up. Like, God owns all of this. And so anyway, I don't want to take too long to answer, but that whole experience from, say, maybe 17, 18 years all the way, even in management at UPS, all the way up through now, what you and I are doing, we are building a business and a ministry, and we're showing through the business, which helps fund the ministry, that you can actually build a business that is faith-based and faith-led without being religious or
oppressive,
weird and oppressive, but one that is about excellence and bringing the heart of God into all that you do. And our success is seen and shown. So we're showing it instead of necessarily
telling it.
Yeah. And then people will listen to you when they know that you care.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're showing that by carrying it out. So what we're doing now is completely different than some one guy trying to force it in place.
Trying to make it happen.
Yeah. But now's a good season, too. The doors are open.
Yeah. And I think that season has changed. We're in a different environment, a different culture now, and it's evolving, and we have to evolve with it and be on the forefront of what it actually looks like. Yeah. When you think about businesses, corporations, or even individuals that you know that are actually doing this, that are living this thing out, is there any kind of example that comes to mind, or someone that influenced you in that capacity that was an inspiration, and not to elevate them, of course, but just to kind of put the whole idea on display? What were your thoughts there?
Well, I've got some friends, around the country that doing something very similar to what we're doing on the West Coast, and pretty inspirational. They're connected with Redding Church, Bill Johnson's ministry. But I think the as far as in business, there's not a lot of examples. What I do see is a lot of hungry people, especially about middle age. Middle age can be 35 to say 60. It's not an exact science, right? It's just a window. But I see a lot of men and women in that camp who are really, really hungry, hungrier than ever.
Yeah.
One of the guys that we're working with, and even his son, just an incredible guy, a real well-known business leader here in our community. And man, he's got a heart of gold. Doesn't quite know how to make that transition, but there's a lot of hunger there. And when guys like that get hold of it, it's going to change everything. And so God's doing that now. So the setting and timing is right. But the biggest thing I think that's encouraging to us to keep going is we see that hunger in key people.
Yeah. I remember there was a gentleman, his name's Wes Piner, and Wes was an agent with Farm Bureau when I was back working at Farm Bureau. And Wes had been there for 18 years, right? But he's just the guy that always did it right. And sadly, that culture, there was a lot of people that did not do it right. Yeah. They were cutting corners. There was just kind of rampant dishonesty and subtle little things that, but Wes is a guy that did it right. He did it with integrity. And he stood up for his values. He didn't shy away from it. He'd ask clients if he could pray for them if they needed that, if they were in a difficult season. And Wes, after 17, 18 years and one of the top agents in the business, he walked away from it all because he felt like the Lord called him to missions overseas. And he went to Vietnam or Cambodia or somewhere for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I remember I was probably 4 to 5 years in the business, starting to feel this kind of call.
Sure.
So to see a man like this who was willing to walk away from what culturally everybody would idolize, to follow what the Lord was doing, but then in a conversation said, I should have done it before, but I was afraid, know? It was just very encouraging for me, not to say that it has to look that way, because by the same token, you see folks like Alan Rippey, who's a friend of ours, who's leveraged his opportunities and connections to help Biddy and Bose with their, and the folks at Live Oak Bank, what they're doing for the culture of their employees and how they're investing in the community and whatnot. So we want to highlight and recognize and then teach people how to actually live this thing out. And it's just it's fun, man. It's exciting.
I think if you tie your examples back to my thought process, an example is we're not looking for people who have necessarily done it, but people who are aiming to do it. People who are hungry and willing to step in, and that's sort of our role. Is we're here to help, inspire, encourage, and teach, to help leaders reach their maximum impact. A lot of these guys are just super wealthy, and it's not about making more money. It's about living a life of impact that is eternal from authority.
Yeah.
So, hungry.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to take a short break. We have 2 more segments here on the show today. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. This is Wake Up Our Faith. We'll be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We're in the second hour, which is our hour focused on faith in business, helping business people understand how to navigate kind of that gap or bridge that gap, if you will, between faith and business, the one that we believe shouldn't be there in the kingdom that has been inadvertently built. Sharing some really cool concepts and some stories today as we kind of kick off this new segment. But want to make sure we recognize our corporate partners and thank them for being a part of this. One of those is Chris Hutchins at Guaranteed Rate. Chris has a great team at Guaranteed Rate. Personally has more than 20 years of experience in the mortgage business. If you're buying or refinancing a home, Chris Hutchins and his team at Guaranteed Rate is a good place to start. 910-344-0304 is their number. Kevin, in the first couple of segments, we kind of gave an idea or a picture, set the stage for what this faith in business conversation is about, why it's important, how to begin looking for it and navigating it in our own lives. And we talked about the obstacle. One of the obstacles being the fact that there is a cultural tension that exists between whatever religion is in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do is break that wall down to say this ain't about religion. It's not about preaching. Mm-mm. It's simply about living out your heavenly value and being the good news where you are spending most of your time.
Right.
The greatest example of Christian behavior and Christian life should be Christians who authentically represent the character of Christ by who they are in their work environment.
Yeah.
And sadly, we put that on the couch because of various reasons, and we're not honest about it, and we don't navigate it. So that's kind of setting the stage for where we are. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of throw across the table here is a question that popped up in a conversation the other day. Uh-huh. This is an entrepreneur, a business owner, and again, assuming those that are listening are Christians in the workplace, in business.
Well, yeah, let me add this in.
Yeah, go ahead.
About that. All this is applied if you are a believer. If you're not, we're not trying to win you over. We'll be friends with you, but this isn't about that. Mm-hmm. This is about the world of Christians that are out there calling themselves Christians who aren't living out this thing fully. So we got to make sure we clarify that.
Yes.
We'd love to have new people and new converts and believers, but we're not a church. We're not trying to do that. We're saying to Christians, get off the fence and live this thing out.
Yes.
So that's really important because you're already on this trajectory. All we're trying to do is help you carry it out. So anyway, back to your example there.
No, I think that's a huge clarification point, and to folks who have maybe a tension with quote unquote church or institutionalized religion, because it doesn't seem to be fostering, their greatest self. And said, hey, you need to hang up that idea or that dream of being a musician, and you just need to go get a job and provide for your family. Yeah. Which
that's a quote. I've had that happen. Yeah, we're not going to help you because you're not being practical. Although I'm sitting there with a book contract from Zondervan, which doesn't pay out for a while. I can either write that or go get a job. Write a book about faith, and that's I just call it what it is. It's walking by sight from leadership instead of faith. So anyway,
and a good clarification point. So we want to attract and help other people who are living in this tension in this gap space, and really say, hey guys, listen, you don't have to go at this alone. There is a way that this can be done. You can continue to be faithful with where you are, but be cultivating your dream and stepping into it as well.
Right.
That's something that, we both have done and we want to help people do. We want to see people becoming that expression in the world for His glory.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we always will do is come underneath businesses and business people that are doing this, with people that are courageous enough to step into following what God's placed on their heart. We are all about that from a business standpoint in helping them with resources and so forth, but also too with our nonprofit, the Life Center.
Yeah.
And we have an outreach program that is the Passion and Provision Initiative, which comes underneath those folks, and it's kind of the whole idea of give a man a fish and teach him while he's learning, or teach a man to fish and feed him while he's learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's without we definitely want to promote that because it's going to grow, and eventually it'll be a campus, and it'll have a lot of functionality of a sort of quote unquote church and a business, but it's really going to be more like a wonderful environment that people can come to have the obstacles removed from their dream. So when you live that out, you're honoring God, and that's a big picture view of it. But our job is to remove obstacles from spiritual, physical, whatever, and then help seed your dream and be part of it with you. So ultimately, the Life Center, we want to support that through Portable Faith Community and mentoring and some different things that the Life Center can do for you at no charge. But on the other side of that, we hope that you will sow into it because you believe in it. Anyway, so there's a picture there. But so back to the world of business, and we can kind of put a wall around that and frame it out, maybe is a better way to say it. Business is a time of day or a place you go where transactions are made, there's commerce, and you participate in that and you're paid for that. And the majority of our time is spent there during the week, whether you're a counselor or you're working in a
plumber.
I was going to say working on cars.
Yeah.
Very blue collar. It's all business. Transactions happen. That's how you get paid. So faith, we don't like to take faith into that world because for the last however many years, 50, 60 years or whatever, culture has changed so radically that they see God as bad and oppressive and religious instead of actually, our heavenly creator who wants us to succeed and live through us in an excellent form. And that's following Jesus, the model of being a son. So all that said, what was the thoughts and questions?
Yeah, stepping into these obstacles here, I think another obstacle that people have when it comes to living out their dreams or becoming the expression that God created to me is the but I've got to eat, or but I've got to make money. And it's just not noble or responsible to go chase this dream of being a musician or being an entrepreneur or whatever when I can just go get a 9-to-5 and make money and provide for my family. So the tension that exists between you as a provider and God as a provider, and getting honest about that, and then developing and cultivating the belief that God wants to provide for your dream to come to life. So you and I have both experienced that in varying forms in our own journey, in our own walk. But for someone who's out there who's thinking, I can't do this because I can't make money doing it, or I don't know how to let it provide, where would you begin the conversation with somebody who sees that as an obstacle?
Well, I would say 3 things to them. Number 1, okay, see you later, and be serious about it. Number 2, I might say, is that a question? How can I help you? Because you're not asking me anything, you're just telling me something. Again, see you later. Okay? We start there because we're not going to waste our time with people who aren't ready. This takes hunger. Now, the third area would be, are you ready? Will you dedicate some time to this and to the Lord? And if you do that, it'll happen for you. Now, I say that not from theology. I say that from a lifetime of experience, but it's specifically the last 10 years where God has done this miraculously over and over and over again. I'll stand on it till my last breath. So if you want that, you're not going to get it any better anywhere else. You can go to John Maxwell, Tony Robbins. It doesn't matter. I don't care. You got to be hungry. You got to be ready. And if you're at that place, yes, here's how we can do it. And there's so much to it. There's so many nuances. You have to start somewhere. And we can talk about one of those things or 2 of them, but there's 50 of them.
No, so for me, what about the person who genuinely wants to, but they're struggling with that fear? So there is a hunger there, but there's also, it's coupled with the hesitation. Is there a starting point for that person who's feeling this thing, but really wrestling some true fears and kind of like old perceptions?
Yeah, people are looking for the wrong answers. They're not asking the right questions. So if somebody would say, but how do I do this? I'd say, stop worrying about how, and start focusing on why are you afraid? And dig into the fear, because that's stronghold. And you got to get past that before you can understand how God works. So you got to see out of your elbows, learn how to do that.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world. You got to be hungry for it, but it's powerful.
Guys, you're listening to and watching Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams will be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams here in the Standard Glass Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker. Wrapping up our second hour of a fantastic show today. First segment for us is about faith topics that are really diving into just being abundantly clear about the necessary processes that are in play for us to live out our faith between Sundays. And in the second hour, focusing on business and how that begins to express itself between Sundays, where we spend the majority of our time. We want to thank our corporate partners for being a part of this show, for making this show possible, one of those being Freeman Landscaping. They're the largest privately owned land and irrigation firm in eastern North Carolina. 1992 is when they were founded, family owned and operated, offering both residential and commercial landscaping. Feel free to give them a call if you have any needs in that capacity, 910-796-1165. 6. Kev, so we've talked a little bit today about the obstacles that exist for people who are Christians, professing Christians, who say they believe, yet are struggling to take that belief and let that faith become infused into their business life. And we've dealt with old perceptions of standing on the table and preaching, inviting somebody to church and that kind of thing, versus just living from heaven through who you are and being that good news and expression in the world, and challenging some questions that are necessarily not the right questions. Instead of like, well, how am I supposed to live my dream and make money doing it? That's the wrong question, and really stepping on that. So as we let's press into that a little bit more, because in the break you said that, this is about changing the way we are approaching everything that we know and everything that we do, because it's all built on strongholds, cultural norms, and kind of the way things have been done.
Right. History. Well, I think people that want a quick answer really aren't willing to necessarily, hopefully they will be, willing to do what's necessary, which is, it's just so big of a deal. That's why discipleship is how purpose is developed. That's why Jesus said, "Go and disciples all men, make disciples of all men." We have to do that. So purpose is birthed or born through that process into the world. It exists before that. But people want to grab hold of it and think, if I'm going to read a book and I'm going to know my purpose. It's like saying me to come up to you and say, "Hey, how do I build a house?" And you can give me a quick answer. Go hire a contractor, get a loan or whatever. That's a marketing brochure answer. But what you're really asking, or what I would be really asking, is I need to know what is the cost. The resources, the time, the energy, the know-how, the wisdom, the people involved. You see, so you got to start with all kinds of organic thought processes. And you also have to remove the obstacles. What are the obstacles? Well, that's those fears and negative thought processes. In other words, how does God speak to you and what's he saying? That's powerful when you understand it, but there's things that get in the way. So even my explanation of it just takes up all the time on our show. You have to learn that you have to look at the fruit back, and you have to look at those who are teaching and discipling you and say, have they done what they're saying? Because that's the fruit, and that's the testimony. That's what you can stand on. It is also in Scripture. So you have to step off into that direction and start to deal with the most important thing first. And it's usually fear or stronghold. Then it's typically learning how to navigate the strongholds of others in relationships, because that's hard. And then it's learning how to fully listen to God and navigating that from the Spirit. That's the very beginning of this, but then things unfold, and it happens. It doesn't happen by know-how. It happens by yielding to the process of God.
One of the quick things, not quick things, but one of the real things that I think is a starting point for someone is, we go to all of the worldly heroes for advice. We go to, what does Tony Robbins have to say about this? Sure. Or, what would John Maxwell say? Or what does my buddy down the road who's built 7 businesses have to say? And, we go to these worldly heroes for this advice on how to navigate it, but we have the Spirit of God that dwells in us and access to the throne room, right, with Him, yet we're not genuinely asking for the advice of the Heavenly Father, the Holy Spirit, to lead our thinking as it relates to our business. And I'm not talking about just, God, help me bring this client in, I just need some money. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about as we intimately and kind of navigate our daily lives, are we truly inviting God into the conversation with us? And I just, I just believe with all of me, the answer is no.
Yeah. Well, it's the enemy wants to derail. The enemy doesn't want you to be successful. And so when you buy into that, but I believe all that, but I can't. when you start down that process, you're missing out on what God has for you, and it's not from faith. And frankly, Scripture says if it's not from faith, it's sin. So that's a big deal. That's what makes worry sin. So if you're going to worry, then just go on down to the strip joint and just do it all, right? Because worry is equally destructive. So when you start in that camp, it's not about the questions and getting them answered to get it all done for you. It's about understanding where you're struggling and getting healed and restored so that you can go into business with a healthy mind and a connected heart and be led by God. Because He's the one that does the heavy lifting. But that's so hard to grasp if you're not ready for it. So even though it's business, which is the responsibility, it starts with people. So remember who you are first, and then you can carry it out in business as the fruit. It will happen if you follow it, but if you don't overcome the obstacles. So it's dealing with the obstacles internally first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as you begin to navigate these obstacles, you become free to be able to truly help and bless other people. Otherwise, you begin leveraging people for your own gain inadvertently. Right. Yes. Because you're not free.
Yeah, you rationalize it. Sorry, it's not personal, it's just business. And that's not something that would ever come out of Jesus' mouth. Yeah. Right?
And that's the place where we want to stand on that rock and just say, this can't happen anymore. Yeah. It's not okay for a professing Christian to say, man, it's not personal, it's just business. Like, that is not in any way, shape, or form God honoring. And what it reveals is a dichotomy in your mind and heart that is honoring God in faith on one day, but then not honoring Him in business on another. Right. And so I feel like that we're at such a time in history when we just have to be the forerunners of this and just say, it's not okay for this to happen anymore. Yeah. It's not okay for businesses to pray before meeting.
Rampant in all areas of life, including business, and we see it at the top of the heap and at the bottom. But there's also a lot of people who are ready to give birth to something incredible and hungry. And so those are the people we want to get behind. But here's a question. I have a whole vetting process here for mentoring and discipling. Whatever you want to call it. You want to call it executive coaching, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same pill in every bottle. But anyway, there's all these different questions you go through, and at the end you go, well, I'm in or I'm out. So it doesn't waste your or my time, our time. But, here's just one question. Would you rather accomplish something on your own, in your own strength, in other words, that amounts to less and give yourself secret credit for it? That's that thing where you're walking around proud of yourself. Or accomplish something impossible that changes the world and assigns God all the credit. Which would you rather do? You see, that's a great question. Now, that question's easy for you and I, but someone else is going to have to, who's not jumped in yet, going to have to think about that.
Be successful and take credit, or do something impossible and give God credit.
Be successful here, a lesser level, way lesser, sure, but fine by the world, or do something that is literally impossible and really changes everything, and you're giving God the credit. I mean, which one do you want? That shows the condition of your heart, if you're ready. That's just one question out of like 37.
Well, depending upon those who are listening, how you answer that question, if you're ready for the impossible, that's where we come in. That's why we're here. Yeah. That's why we exist as an organization. That's our efforts and our nonprofit entity as well, is to help people wake up their faith, to help eradicate spiritual poverty. Want to invite you guys to participate, to dive in. WakeUpMyFaith.com is how you can get plugged in, or you can connect with us by emailing us, info@uprint.life. Kevin, as always, man, thanks for your time and wisdom, for being with us today. Love you guys. Appreciate you being here. We'll be back next week for more Wake Up Our Faith.